Hey guys, good morning. Some expectations for the classes that I'll be hosting is that you're taking notes on notebook paper. So when I have a problem, make sure you're copying it down and you're drawing pictures when necessary. When I ask you to pause the video, please do that and complete the work on your own when prompted. So I'm trusting you guys to pause the video and not necessarily wait for me to give you the answers. All right, at this time, I would like you to pause your video and answer this do now question. The product of two consecutive integers is 30. Find the integers. So go ahead and hit pause. All right, so let's go over this. If you guys remember from the beginning of the year, if I was doing consecutive integers, I begin with x, and the one next to it is just x plus 1, because that's the next number. I just add 1. For example, 7 and 8 are consecutive integers, and I just added 1 to it. If it's asking for the product, I am multiplying them together to equal 30. When I simplify this becomes x squared plus x equals 30. Now this looks like a quadratic equation, except for I need to get this to equal 0. In order to do that, I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides. When I do that, I have something that's more familiar that we're dealing with. X squared plus x minus 30 equals 0. Now, this is a level 1 question, so it's really easy. I just draw my two binomials, and because the a value is 1, I can just stick the variable x into both of the parentheses, and I need to figure out what multiplies to equal negative 30 and adds to equal x. When I do that, I should get negative 5 and positive 6. Remember when I'm finding the solutions, I set everything equal to 0. And when I solve for 0, my final answer should be x equals 5 and x equals negative 6. All right, our learning log for today is you can use and apply the quadratic formula. That's something new. And then our agenda, we're going to do some practice, learn a song to help you guys memorize the formula, and then do independent practice, okay? So this is what the quadratic formula looks like. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And where we're getting those a, b, and c values is from the quadratic function formula that we've already learned. So that's our a value, our b value, and our c value. And just as a reminder, when we're solving for our x values, that is our solution. So what that means is how many times it crosses the intersection, the x-axis. So it could be one value, it could be two values, or it could be no values. All right, so at this time, I want you to pause this video and I want you guys to go to the YouTube video that I've linked on Google Classroom. So this formula can be very difficult to remember, but I've linked something for you guys to help you with that. All right, once you guys go into Google Classroom and you pull up this link, it's going to be a YouTube video called the Quadratic Formula song. I want you guys to listen to this one time, two times, maybe three times until you have the formula memorized. And the quadratic formula, although it's very long, is one of the top memorized mathematical formulas. And you'll see in the next slides, it's really, really, really helpful for you guys to memorize this. So go ahead and take a listen and then come back to the lesson. All right, so let's begin our application. I'm going to begin with a standard quadratic function. And this one says sometimes a quadratic equation cannot be factored. So if this could be factored, technically it would be a level 1 question. I would draw two binomials, stick my variable x in both sets of parentheses, and try to figure out what multiplies to equal 3 and adds to equal 7. However, if you think about it, there's nothing that would multiply to equal 3 and add to equal 7. So this is not factorable. What we can always do is the quadratic equation. So I'm going to go ahead and label A, B, and C. And remember this A value, because there's nothing there, is an invisible 1. I'm going to use the quadratic formula that I have here in this corner, and all I'm going to do is plug in my values for A, B, and C. So I begin with x equals. Right here, it says negative b, and I know that my b value is 7, so I'm just going to write negative 7 and continue on. I have plus or minus the square root. Right here it says b squared. Again, my b value is 7, so 7 squared. Continue on with the formula, minus 4 times a times c. My a value right here is 1. And then my C value right here is 3. Last part of the formula is the fraction bar. And this is going to be over 2 times the value A. Our A value is 1. Now this is calculator active. All you need to do is plug this in. I'm going to use my TI-83, but you might need to use Desmos or your Chromebook depending on whether or not you have a calculator. So the best bet to do is to start off with this square root. So when I do that, I'm going to pull up the square root, second x squared, and type this in. So 7 to the second power minus 4 times 1 times 3. I'm just going to do that for now. That's going to equal 6.08. I'm going to round that to 6.1. So all this in yellow is equivalent to 6.1. And in front of it, I'm going to drop down the sign that I taught you guys last week, the plus or minus. Now all I have to do is carry through everything I have not solved yet. X equals is in the front. Drop down the negative 7, and 2 times 1 is 2 in the denominator. Now, you guys were taught that this plus and minus sign can give you 2 different things. On the top, we're going to do x equals negative 7 plus 6.1 over 2. That deals with the plus sign. On the bottom, we're going to do the same thing, negative 7, but now we're going to do minus 6.1 over 2. And those two are going to yield different answers. Remember your order of operations when you're doing this on the calculator. I have to do negative 7 plus 6.1 first, and then I can hit divided by 2. When I do that, my first solution, or my first x-intercept or roots or zeros, is going to be negative 4.5. So negative 4.5. I'm going to write that right here. My second one, when I do this on my calculator, again, remember your order of operations. I need to do negative 7 minus 6.1 first, and then I can divide by 2. It's going to be negative 6.55. So when I do that, these are going to be my answers. These are going to be my solutions. First one is x equals negative 0.45. And my second one is x equals negative 6.55. So I box that as my final answer. If you guys want to double check this, I have my formula right here. I've already typed it into Desmos, and I'll pull this over. If I click my x-intercepts, negative 6.5, negative 0.46, that matches completely what we did with the quadratic formula. All right, let's keep going. So this one says, always set the equation to 0 first. We know that because we're solving for our solutions, aka roots, aka zeros. So we need to get this over here. You guys know that I need to do it through subtraction. So I'll just rewrite this as x squared minus 8. Let's do this in standard form, actually. Minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. All right? And then I'm always going to label A, B, and C. So I have A here, which is invisible 1, B, which is negative 2, and C, which is negative 8. All right, and then we go back in and we just use this formula. So x is equal to negative b. Negative b is negative 2, so that's going to be a positive 2. plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that's negative 2 squared. And I want to put that negative 2 inside parentheses. All right, negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c. Our a value is 1, and our c value is negative 8. In my denominator, I have over 2 times a, and our a value is 1. All right, so I'm going to begin with this square root. I'll highlight it so you know what I'm doing. All right, and square root sign. And like I said, this is really key here. Make sure you put your negative inside a set of parentheses because you're taking it to a power. Subtraction sign, minus 4 times a times c. And what that's going to give me is, what did I do? Oh, okay, I forgot the negative. So square root of negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. Yep, and then I get 6. So, I mean, as you guys saw, I messed up with one of the functions right there. So the biggest mistakes that people make with the quadratic formula is forgetting things like negatives, like I did right there. So inside this yellow part, I have the value 6. So 6, and then I drop down everything else. So it's going to be plus or minus 6. And I drop down the x equals 2, and the denominator is 2 times 1, so that's just 2. Because it's a plus and minus, I'm going to have two different answers. On the top, I'm going to have x is equal to 2 plus 6 over 2. And on the bottom, I'm going to use the minus sign. X is equal to 2 minus 6 over 2. And I can do this one in my head. So 2 plus 6 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. And on the bottom, I have 2 minus 6, which is negative 4, divided by 2, which is negative 2. So my final answers here are going to end up being x is equal to negative 4 and x is equal to negative 2. Okay, and then my final example to do with you guys, can I use the quadratic formula for equations that can be factored? So our first one is something that could not be factored. This one can be factored, and we'll use that to double check our answer. So set it to equal, gotta move this 21 over, do that through subtraction, and I end up getting x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. I'm gonna label A, which is 1, B, negative 4, and then C is negative 21. Go back. X is equal to negative B. If if B is negative 4, negative B is negative 4, and that's a positive 4. Plus or minus square root of B squared, so negative 4 squared minus 4 times A times C. My A value is 1. And my C value is negative 21. This is all going to be over my denominator, 2 times A, and again, A is 1. On my calculator, hit the square root sign, and like I said, last time I messed up typing these numbers in, so make sure you're doing this correctly. Negative 4 squared minus 4, common mistake is people might put a negative. Make sure that sign is a minus. So minus 4 times 1 times negative 21. So inside my square root, I should have the number 10. So plus or minus the value 10, and then drop down everything else. X equals 4, and 2 times 1 is going to be 2. Again, this is an easy one, so I'm just going to do this real quick. On the top, I'm going to do addition. On the bottom, I'm going to do subtraction. On the top, I have 4 plus 10, which is 14 over 2. And on the bottom, I have 4 minus 10 over 2. So actually, let's backstab. I want this to be extra clear. So on the top, I'm doing 4 plus 10 over 2. And on the bottom, I'm doing 4 minus 10 over 2. When I simplify these, this becomes 14 over 2. The bottom becomes negative 6 over 2. And then my final answers end up being x is equal to 7 right here, and x is equal to negative 3 on the bottom. All right, so we have 7 and negative 3. Let's double check by factoring. So one more time, we have x is equal to 7, x is equal to negative 3. If you guys remember, this is a level 1 problem. So I just need two binomials. I can stick an x in both of the sets of parentheses, and I need to figure out what multiplies to equal, remember we rewrote this, negative 21, but adds to equal 4. And when I do that, I should get negative 7 and positive 3. And when I set them equal to 0, each of them, I'll have x equals 7 and x equals negative 3. So I just double checked that that is correct, and I did it in two different methods. All right, so I have 3 problems for you guys to do, and each time I want you guys to pause in between before I reveal the answers. So the first one is x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Go ahead and pause your video and solve using the quadratic formula. All right, and when you do that, you should get the values. X is equal to negative 2 and x is equal to 5. Go ahead and pause here and then use the quadratic formula to solve this. All right, and when you do that, you should have x is equal to negative 4, x is equal to 0.33, and as a rule of thumb, I always want you guys to round to the hundredths place. Last one, go ahead and pause and use the quadratic formula to solve. When you do that, you should get x is equal to negative 0.94, x is equal to 1.22. You don't necessarily need this one. Round it to the hundredths place and everything's fine. All right? Okay, so your practice today is going to be on Go Formative, and you have options about how you can solve using the quadratic formula or whatever methods that we've learned in the past. So first, you can use the square root method that we solved or that we use when there's no b value. You can factor using a level 1, level 2. Quadratic formula always, always, always works. So if you go back, even things that cannot be factored can be solved using quadratic formula. And then your last option, you may always double check using decimals. However, these 3 need to be used before you double check. And like I said, round any decimal answers to the hundredths place. When you have 4 different methods, you can tell right away which ones might be the best ones to use. So for example, number 1, you see there is no b value. So if there's no b value, what I could do is just solve using the square roots. So you move the 9 to the other side and continue to solve this way. All right, so you're free to use whatever methods you want, but there are some methods that might work better than others for different questions. When you do that, this is what your Go Formative is going to look like. There are 13 questions, okay? And then when you're done, make sure that you answer this question as your exit ticket on Google Forms. All right, so reach out if you have any questions and get your work done.